Okay, so a year ago, we had Zack, Polanski and Ellie Chowens with leadership hustings here. Then Green Party membership was about 53,000. Now, a year later, Green Party membership is just under 250,000. It has been the most extraordinary growth of a political party in many, many years. And speaking myself as an activist since late 89, many of us here who've been plugging away for years at this really is the most exciting time for the Green Party and a progressive movement. Zack, so over the last year, a lot of people have been asking me, oh, Zack Polanski, what's he like? I haven't heard of him before. And I was sort of struggling to think, well, you know, politically, I think everybody's heard him speak. He's extremely good with words. And I just want to remind ourselves that words are one thing, but it's how you deport yourself, your deeds. Zack and Richie were with us at Glastonbury in the Speakers Forum last year. Big camp of 50 people, 40 or so speakers. Morning meetings, we lived together for 7, 8, 9 days. We were our own wee community, crew food, side around in the evening, going out and doing stuff. So you might think party political leaders are quite busy and got lots of things to do. So I just want to relate to you that Zack and Richie did their stint washing up in the kitchen. Okay, which may seem like a small thing, but what it shows is that not only were they at the morning meetings and being a big part of it, but they're also putting into the community. So it's not just about words, it's about deeds. So with that in mind, I think we're ready for Zack now, Chris. With that in mind, I want to hear a bloody huge green gathering cheer for the leader of the Green Party, Zack Polanski!
Okay, let's get on with it. I really appreciate that. Actually, just before we get on with it, that was such a lovely introduction. And actually, I want to give a huge thank you, both to Shane, but actually the entire team who are making this tent happen. All the speakers, all the crew, all the techs. Thank you very much. Thank you. In terms of a format, I'm going to talk for a little bit now. I'm making myself sound like I'm going to do a stand-up routine. I'm going to talk for a bit now, and then I am going to take questions. I realise I'm probably not going to be able to take every single person's question in this tent, but what we're going to do afterwards is anyone is welcome. We're going to take a big group photo outside, and then I'll hang around for roughly an hour just to see if anyone's got any other questions. So just to say, if you have a burning question, I will try and make time for that. The subject of this talk is quite general. It's a year as leader. And what I'm taking that as is, first of all, I want to talk about the state our country is in, the state the world is in. And that's almost separate to my leadership, but I think it's important to get on the same page about context and the times that we're in. I want to talk about some of the things that have been amazing as leader. Shane just listed some of them, the massive membership growth, the poll growth, winning a small constituency that I might talk about a little bit later. And I do want to be frank. I want to talk about the challenges too. We're a party that is a socialist party. We're on the left, and we have a billionaire press who aren't that keen on left-wing parties or left-wing politicians. And so I want to be frank about some of those challenges too. And more than anything, and you can hold me to account for this, I want to talk about hope. And I spoke about this the other day, another speech I did, and someone heckled me. It was a nice heckle, but they said hope and action. And that's so true. Because, yeah. I've realized I've encouraged people now to applaud a heckle that happened last week. That's dangerous territory. But the reason why it's so important, and I talk about this all the time anyway, is if you have hope without action, you're kind of marching people up to a hill, but then you don't know what to do when you get there. And I say what we will do when we get there, because what I hope runs throughout this talk and anything I do is it's not about me. True leadership is never going to be top down. True leadership is when we all recognize our own power, whether you're a local councillor, whether you're a campaigner, an activist, a family member, a human being. I see one of my jobs, and everyone's job who has the space and the privilege to do this, to empower others to recognize their own power, to both speak and to act with hope and a plan. Because the other is also true. If you have a plan without hope, no one's going anywhere, because you're not going to galvanize people. And I think what we've got right, and it really is a we as a Green Party, and I'm talking about the environmental movements too and the left more broadly, over the last year, is there have been times where we've absolutely been aligned with hope and a plan. And so I think we need to consider, what does the plan look like moving forward, and how do we galvanize even more people? I love how many people there are in this tent and outside the tent. I hope you can hear me. I want us to think about outside of the tent. What does that mean? People who would never come to a festival or would not come to a political meeting because they have busy and chaotic lives. They're worried about paying the bills, paying the rent, or they have a disability, or they have a long-term health sickness, or whatever it might be. We've got to make sure that we're creating spaces that are as accessible and inclusive as possible. So this movement, the movement to take on the fossil fuel giants, to take on the vast inequality in our society, and to take on the vested interests, that movement has to grow and grow. So in terms of setting the context, you might have noticed, but our country is literally on fire. And there has never been a more important moment for an environmental movement. That's not true as soon as I said it. The most important moment would have been decades ago. And we know that the fossil fuel companies knew exactly what they were doing. They had the science around what happened when they drilled for oil and gas or burnt oil and gas. And they chose to sat on it. And just like the tobacco industry that gaslit a nation, or in fact the entire world, by hiring scientists or doctors to do their bidding, and scientists and doctors are incredibly important. This is not an anti-science talk, you'll be pleased to hear. But the vested interests, where you're buying people off to do your bidding and convince people that tobacco was good for them, is actually the same playbook that has happened with the fossil fuel giants for so long. In fact, in Spain, when they had that tragic flood in Valencia, they did some polling of the Spanish population to see who did they blame for the floods. And blame's an interesting subject we'll probably get into, but this is how they framed it. Who are you blaming? And actually they blamed the king. Not Shell, not BP, but they blamed the king. And it's just interesting that I see that as a huge project that those of us who care about the planet, which I hope is every single person in this room, have to do, which is not to lecture people or to hector people, but to find ways to communicate, to connect. And actually, I remember Shane hosting the debate of the hustings. Hustings just is a political word for a debate where you have candidates and you put forward your pitches. And I think the central argument of that debate, which I've continued through this year, is the importance of storytelling. We've always had science, facts, and research on our side. We've always known what the problems are, and we've already known a lot of the solutions, but we just rarely connect. And that's because if you just talk about spreadsheets or data, people will often move much quicker through fear or through an intuitive story. Now, there's a danger here because we don't ever want to play on people's fear. In fact, that's exactly what the right do. They don't work with information and science. They will literally make things up, and the vested interests will make things up. And then they will connect a very powerful story. And we hear these stories over and over again. You only have to turn on GB News, please don't, but you only have to turn it on for a few moments, and you just hear the repetition of these stories. You hear the politicians on the right, and indeed the activists on the far right, and you hear these stories over and over again. And it's true, the stories are powerful. When people are struggling and when they're scared, the idea that someone coming over from another country is the enemy or threat becomes seductive. And that's why we've got to be really clear that the threat in this country is not coming over by small boat. It's not someone who is using a food bank or who is struggling. The real threat in this country right now is flying above our heads by private jet, over the food banks, over our communities, and we need to name that. Now, there is also... There is also more nuance to this, because we must name it. And when we come to blame, I think it's important that we see clearly, speak authentically, and name what the problem is and what we can do about it. It's also important, though, that we don't allow our movement to just become angry or just to become about blaming things. I think it is important to connect with people's anger. If you don't connect with anger, people don't feel like you're talking to them. People in this country are angry right now. People in the world are angry right now. And I see it as our job to present the alternative, which is hope and a plan. But we have to recognize why people are angry right now. And so if we come back to the fact that the planet is burning, that we have these wildfires. In Suffolk, there's a wildfire which is equivalent to 200 football pitches. In fact, that was a statistic I heard a day ago. I would imagine it's even bigger now. We also know that because of excess heat in the last couple of months, 3,000 people have died from that excess heat. Yet, I talked about billionaire-backed media. How many people in this country know that that's going on in any clear way? We get news and noise all the time, but very rarely do we talk about these existential threats, because that's also destroying nature. And we live in one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. And if we lose nature, we lose everything. So it's absolutely vital that we recognize what's happening right now. And we see stories about needing to drill for oil and gas in Jackdaw and Rosebank. And various stories get used. One is jobs. Now, let me be clear, jobs are really important. I've talked about inequality, and we know lots of people are really struggling. So we do need jobs. But Jackdaw, it looks like it's going to be about 27 jobs. So the idea that they are doing this for jobs is just utter nonsense. Now, I want to be clear, if there was thousands and thousands of jobs, it still wouldn't be okay, but there would be a clearer argument for why you need to replace that sector with new jobs, with new industries. Now, we need to do that anyway, with renewables, with making sure that we have jobs that are fit for the energy of the future, that are fit for the communities of the future. But the fact that this is being done under the name of jobs is just a lie. And then on Rosebank is an oil and gas field in the North Sea. The cumulative emissions of drilling there would be, it's either 23 or 28 of the poorest income countries in the world. That's the cumulative emissions. On top of that, we have already extracted more oil and gas in the entire world than we can burn to have a livable planet. Now, that was a long phrase, so I'm just going to repeat that again, because I often want to connect with it, because I think it's so scary and so abstract that you can just say it or you can just read it and you don't really hold on to it. We have already extracted more oil and gas across the whole planet than we can burn and still have a livable planet. So I'm not standing here today, and I know some people will disagree with this, and that's fine, and say, let's turn oil and gas off overnight. We're ready to do this immediately. We do need to have a transition, but we have already extracted that oil and gas, and the transition needs to be happening right now. Now, this can all sound pretty grim. I've come here and said, I want to offer hope, and then I've just outlined some of the horrendous things going on. The huge hope is we know what to do about this. We know that renewable energy is the cheapest and greenest form of energy. Yes, the sun doesn't shine all the time. No, the wind doesn't blow all the time. But that's why we need variable energy. We need to make sure that we're connecting those different sources. We also need to invest in community energy. Community energy is so important for so many reasons. First, it gives people power. Yes, literal physical power in terms of energy, but even more so, democratic power. Because I think one of the reasons why we're seeing the right in this country galvanize and mobilize is people feel, no, they don't just feel, they know that politics is being done to them rather than with them. And that's why I hope I'll get a moment to talk about things like citizens' assemblies or participatory democracy, but also in even simpler form, or not even simpler, another parallel route, is to have community energy where you have solar panels on the community building that's in the area. And so all of the community get the proceeds of where that money goes to, and they get to decide as a community where that money goes. This means communities start to meet, to discuss, even to disagree and argue, but in respectful community ways, where we can start to rebuild what future communities look like. Now, there's a really important point there, which I want everyone to hear. In fact, if you hear nothing else, I hope you hear lots, but if you hear nothing else, always want to make sure this point is clear. It's not actually my point, I have to confess. I'm quoting Zoran Mamdani, the incredible new mayor of New York. Yeah, he deserves applause. And Zoran was actually quoting Ed Koch, who was another mayor, at a different point. So it's like a Russian doll of people quoting people. Anyway, the point is this. If you agree with me on 7 out of 10 things, great. That's all we need to work together. We don't have to agree on everything. If you agree with me on 10 out of 10 things, go see a psychiatrist, because that's weird. We do not need to agree on everything. And I think whether you want to use the label the left, socialist, progressive, green, environmentalist, whatever your label is, I think the billionaire press, again, along with ourselves sometimes, have done a very good job of dividing us, of us focusing on what is the smallest difference we can find to create differences in our movement. Now, I think it's important to have differences. I think it's important to have robust disagreement about differences. I also think it's important to put those differences aside when we need to and make sure that we work together, obviously with red lines. And that's the point about the red lines. And so the question then becomes, what are your red lines? Now, more widely with the environment too, we also know this is an opportunity to have basically a democratic green revolution in this country, where we look at all the jobs that can be created in order to tackle the climate crisis. Another stat, the cost of decarbonizing by 2050 would cost less than just a single oil shock or energy shock. You may have noticed in Ukraine, we had an energy shock. In Iran, we are having an energy shock. So we've already had 2 times as much as it would have cost if we had just decarbonized in the first place. So if anyone tells you that we can't change our homes, our transport, our food systems, our agricultural systems in order to be able to tackle the climate crisis because it's too expensive, that's just not true. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say these things are all simple. In fact, we, or often me, get accused of saying, oh, he's just giving simple solutions. That's absurd. The solutions the Green Party are giving, I believe, are incredibly complex. They've been for decades researched and changed. We very much believe in the party that if you're looking at health policy, you want to talk to nurses, doctors, consultants, people who work in that sector. If you're looking at education policy, talk to teachers, parents, for students themselves. Make sure people with lived experience, and I was going to say expertise, but lived experience is expertise. So lived experience and other expertise. Make sure they're at the table to co-design and co-produce. So I'm not coming here pretending I've got simple or easy answers. These things are quite complex. I think what is simple and easy is when you recognize the blocks to progress are not our imaginations. The blocks to progress are not our ability to organize or the resources to do things. The blocks to our progress are narratives that tell us it cannot be done. Narratives for so long that have told us we don't deserve better, it always has to be like this. And I will quote a certain new prime minister, I'm just being pragmatic. Now, it's important to be pragmatic, but I would say, what is pragmatic about allowing our world to burn? What is pragmatic about continuing to burn oil and gas as if we can just go on like this? What is pragmatic about recognizing that even if you're the biggest fan of drilling in the North Sea, it's not just a physical impossibility, it's a geological impossibility. We have already extracted most of the reserves already. So when people tell oil and gas workers, it's fine, we are keeping your jobs, they're lying to them. Those jobs cannot remain there. And those oil and gas workers are incredibly skilled. Those communities in Scotland have so much resource and so much ability. Rather than lying to people, what we should have been doing was sitting down with them, with their trade unions, and co-designing and co-producing what the future looks like. As I said, the best chance to do that was decades ago, but we can still do it now and turn it around now. Now that's the environment and the climate, although there's so much more to say, but I just want to go on a whistle-stop tour. I often talk about the Green Party that everyone has known for a long time. We stand for environmental and climate justice, and that's never going to change. In fact, it's even more important now than ever before, because it looks like other parties have either completely abandoned the climate and nature, or it's just not at the top of their priority list. And it's so important that climate and nature is embedded in everything we do. And there is no environmental justice without social, racial, and economic justice too. Thank you. Now, to sum this up, I could talk about this for an hour, but I won't. But in a minute, what do I mean by that? Well, it's recognizing that countries in the global south, we've extracted so much of their wealth for our oil and gas. We benefited from the Industrial Revolution. And obviously, there are so many good things about that, so many good things that we should be patriotic about, that this country did do and can do. But it's also undeniable fact that there is so much problematic history there with colonialism, with empire. And so often the countries who have done the least to cause the climate crisis are the ones who are already facing the worst impacts. So it's about us recognizing our historic responsibilities and our responsibilities right now. But this is not just international, it is also domestic. When you think about clean air, toxic air, particularly in our cities, is often responsible for thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, of premature deaths. As well as the deaths from toxic air, there's links to mental health issues. There are links to obvious breathing issues, asthma, diabetes, and some form of cancers. That's what toxic air is doing to our bodies. Toxic air is disproportionately in Black and Asian communities and or working class communities. And that's no coincidence. That's because so often there has been a democratic deficit, largely because of the first past the post system, again because of vested interests, where councillors or MPs in those areas knew that they were going to get elected, so they didn't need to listen or engage with those communities. Incinerators, I would say, is one of the biggest examples of this, but we're also seeing it pop up with data centres. The fact that data centres are extracting our water, we already have a water security crisis. And I'm ponging off so many issues here, but hopefully it's firing questions for later on. With artificial intelligence, we know the cat is out the bag. This is not about shutting off artificial intelligence, and nor would we necessarily want to. There are spaces where people don't enjoy their jobs, or there are admin tasks that could be made more efficient by using artificial intelligence. I also know that I used to be a theatre actor. The amount of creative friends that I have, or musicians, or artists, or writers, who are so worried about what the impact of artificial intelligence is going to be. At the very least, we need proper regulation on this. But to do the regulation, we should not be going, as the previous Labour government was under Keir Starmer, to the tech billionaires to listen to them about what they want their regulation to be. The TUC did a brilliant campaign of collective bargaining around the creative workers in every sector, not just creativity, but any sector where AI is threatening to replace jobs or people's skills. It's really important those people are at the table, so we know that decisions are being made on behalf of people and planet, and not so a billionaire, or indeed a trillionaire, sadly, I have to now say, can benefit from this. We really need to take that on. We also know that we hear this mantra constantly from governments, both Conservative and Labour governments, that there's no money left. We can't do this because it's not possible. The 50 wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the population. To spell that out, that's 50 families versus 34 million people. So when people say there is no money left or there is no wealth left, again, it is completely untrue. What they are saying is they're not willing to redistribute power and wealth fairly. And when we hear these facts, thank you. I think you've preempted the applause, because I suspect what might get more applause is when you hear these facts, when we're looking for hope and a plan, think it's time to tax for rich. Now, people will say, the Daily Mail will say, and I know you're in here somewhere. I look forward to the lovely piece you'll write tomorrow. When I say tax for rich, people will say that's just a simple answer. And you know what? It is pretty simple. If you recognize that people are hoarding wealth while people are struggling and sleeping on the street, it's quite simple what you have to do. It is true, it's not easy, But it's only not easy because successive governments for decades have designed a political system and designed a taxation system and sold off our media. It's a recurring theme here, to billionaires. I think it's 3 or 4 billionaires who own the vast majority of our media, who pump 90%, thank you, who pump out totally that we can't possibly tax the rich because they will just leave. Now, I don't want to get too lost in this discussion because I want to cover other things, but I think it's an important thing to take on. This idea of capital flight has never really been proved. And often what gets quoted is a report by a group called Henley and Partners. Now, Henley and Partners literally make their money by selling golden passports or visas to high net worth individuals. I can't possibly imagine why they might have created a report. And when you look at the methodology of their report, they went on LinkedIn and extrapolated from some data this entire report. And it often gets, or used to it, they've stopped quoting it to be fair, it gets quoted back at you constantly. Now, I could talk more about that, but actually I want to make things harder for myself but by using the reverse argument and going, what if it was true? What if there was capital flight? What if people were leaving? If you take billionaires in this country, in fact, let's take the poorest billionaire, so they've just got £1 billion. Right. It's turned into Panto. There's your Daily Mail headline. Yeah. They are making, a billionaire is making passive income, so they're not earning it, they are making it every single week, £1 million, every single week. Now, they could have a great week, and good luck to them, spending it on hospitality and services and really, live it up. They might find it difficult to do that every single week without being exhausted. So what they start to do with their money is they start to put it into assets, our buildings, our homes, our estates. They start to own that and hoard that up. Now, there's obviously only so much buildings they can have, and we already have a housing crisis, which I'm sure, again, we'll get onto. But once they bought the assets, where do they go next? Well, then they buy our democracy. They donate to politicians. They donate to campaigns. They fund think tanks where they don't reveal where their money's coming from. And those same think tank reports, you've guessed it, end up in the billionaire-owned press and then is used as data and evidence, whereas really often it's come from nowhere. And so it's a perpetuating cycle. And what I would say is if you're a billionaire or a multimillionaire in this country and you don't want to spend 1% or get taxed 1% on your £10 million or more, or 2% on £1 billion or more. And by the way, you're still making interest every single week, quite obviously. That is not taxing more than your interest. So that's taxing on the interest, essentially. And you say, I want to leave this country because I don't want a funded NHS. I don't want an education system that is employing the people who might be working in my company in future years. I don't want transport that is accessible, that is affordable, that is comfortable to ride in. Then I think we should wave you off goodbye. I think we should be more patriotic as a country. Thank you. And by the way, it's not just me making that argument. There's a brilliant group you should all check out called Patriotic Millionaires. And Patriotic Millionaires, the clue is in the title. They are a group of millionaires who are patriotic and say, actually, could you tax us more? Because in a more equal society, that obviously benefits for poorest people. That is an obvious argument. But it also benefits for richest too. Because in a more equal society, we have less crime, we have better health, we have more communities where people feel like they have a purpose and connection, which ultimately we're human beings, is what we're all talking about, is connection and purpose and love and compassion for other people. And so patriotic millionaires have been making that argument for a long time. Now, someone might say to me, well, why can't they just give their money away? And do you know what? A lot of them do. But the point is, as a society, we should not be relying on charity of the very rich to fund our public services or to make our society keep going. We should have a fair, progressive taxation system. It's as simple as that. And finally, before I start to wrap up and talk more about my year and on a personal level and take questions, we can't have this conversation about what's going on in the world right now without recognizing the freedom that so many people do not have. In so many places where there are oppressed people, where very often we have played a role, either in the past or currently, where we have to recognize our role on the international stage and recognize that our role is changing. We used to talk, or we still do talk, but very often about being this global power. And we know how that reinforced itself through empire and through invasion. Of course, we should be proud of the things that make us good as a country. And we should be proud when we get to the negotiation stage that if we approach those negotiations by looking to build peace, to build democracy, as long as we're doing that in a way that is facilitating a space for others, i.e. the people who are most affected, to do that thing. This is not me coming here and saying we have no role on the international stage, but I think we have to look at how our role is evolving and also needs to change. And whether we could name various conflicts, but I think the one that has really resonated with people, because for 3 years now, over 3 years, we have seen it live streamed on our phones and our TVs, and we understand our country is not just complicity, but active participation through the selling of arms sales, through the sharing of intelligence, through the fact that it is important that we do boycott where there have been illegal settlements. We need to say, and have been saying, to this government, it is time to end our participation and it's time to end the genocide in Gaza and in Palestine. And I want to acknowledge, people sometimes say, you talk a lot about Palestine, and that's because there's a strong history of occupation and of apartheid, and you don't talk about other things like Yemen or Sudan. And I do accept that. I think we all have a role to talk even more about what's happening on the world stage. I also think that it's totally legitimate to focus on our political and democratic pressure on the spaces where our government have the most leverage. And so two of those things can be true at the same time. This might seem like I'm pinging off, but a thought's occurred to me 3 times now, and I've not said it, but I'm going to say it now. So I have a podcast called Bold Politics. I've not come here to plug the podcast, but it is a very good podcast. Each week I have a different guest on to talk about an issue or a campaign. And what I love about the podcast is there have been lots of names you'll recognize on there. Owen Jones, Hassan Piker, Ash Sarkar, I could keep naming people. It's worrying once you name 3 names, you think about all the people you're going to offend. But actually, the episodes I'm proudest of, with total respect to those people who are amazing, are the episodes where I platform people who aren't famous. So there was an episode recently where there were 3 people who were carers, and I just sat down with them for an hour and talked about their experience of being carers. There was an episode where I sat down with a migrant worker from an amazing union called Voices of the World, which is UVW, United Voices of the World, which is a migrants union, and talked to a hotel cleaner called Doris. In fact, she's a supervisor for hotel cleaners. They were the first group of women in decades who went on strike and won their strike, and platformed her to be able to tell that story. But the most recent episode is actually really on my mind, so I just was going to mention that, which is a brilliant journalist and commentator called Natasha Devon. She actually has a show on LBC on Saturday nights in the evening where she just, people call in and she chats. But she's just released a book called The Nuance Drought. And it does what it says on the title. It's about the fact that nuance is totally lost from our conversation constantly. And she interviewed lots of people, including me, about a year ago, about what does nuance mean in politics. And the reason why I mention it now is I was leader then, probably it was my 2nd month. And I talked about nuance, and I was pleased. I remember saying I'm pleased with the ability right now with social media to be able to create nuance in our conversation. I think it's a King Lear quote. I'm now quoting Caroline Lucas, quoting King Lear. But she said to me recently, one of her favorite things that she thinks about is, and that also can be true. So to say one thing and to say another thing that could sound contradictory, and that also can be true. And I think it's so important. And when I talked earlier on about my challenges, or the challenges of the party, is I think it was going to be easier to be able to do, and that can also be true. Because yes, social media is very powerful for getting your message straight to people. But again, we are taking on vested interests who will very often remove the nuance, will remove the complexity of the conversation while shouting at you, or digitally shouting at you, that you're offering simple answers as they digest or filter the conversation to its lowest common denominator, as opposed to recognizing actually we need nuance in our conversation right now. I want to get to questions. I've realized I said I'd talk personally, so I will do that in 2 minutes and then jump to questions. It's easy to say it's been the most incredible privilege of my life to become leader of a party and just see it rocket. And that's because people often say to me, oh, it must be grim working in politics, or it must be, really hard or difficult. And it is difficult sometimes, but it's the opposite of grim, because often you'll have seen me on the media, you'll probably see less of a really important part of my job, which is I visit communities constantly, almost every single day. I go to where there's green councillors or councils or places where we're campaigning and see projects, amazing projects that people are doing. In fact, I want to be less partisan. Sometimes a project isn't even a Green Party project or a political party project. I see the food banks people are running, where it's outrageous that they're having to run them, but the generosity and love and compassion for people can only leave you feeling hopeful and inspired. I see the community energy projects, where I talked about if people feel like politics is being done to them, that will give a rise to the right and the far right. But when people go into a community and go, we are going to do this together, that's the exact way to empower people. And I feel so inspired every time I see that. I see the projects where people, through their love and compassion, make sure they reach out to marginalized people and show them absolute solidarity. And that's hopeful and inspiring too. So I've spent the whole time pretty much inspired and hopeful. Now, you probably noticed our poll ratings at one point went rocket high. We were polling at about 20%. We're now polling between 10 and 13%. If you told me a year ago when I was on this stage, when we were polling between 5 and 7%, that we were about to double our polling, even when things were more difficult, I would have bitten your hand off for that. I also think if you said to most environmental charities or social justice charities, here's a movement with 230,000 people that is still growing, that has a national platform, and we have this moment where we are able to tell vital stories by speaking with clarity, authenticity, and truth. And that's not me, although I'm obviously part of that, but it's about all the people I was talking about around the country. Then that is such an incredible moment. So the challenges are obvious, and I don't need to dwell on them, although you're welcome to ask me about them. It's the billionaire-backed media. It's the fact that the nuance is so often lost, and there is so much shouting and noise. And in shouting and noise, it's easy to get stuck in anger, or to see that communities are stuck in anger, and actually to be able to replace that with hope and compassion, and at the same time find the nuance. It's a juggling act. But what I'm confident about is that as a movement, not just for Green Party, but more widely, we are getting better and better at it. And I have Tony Benn ringing in my ear. He's often on your wall, isn't he? Where he says, I'm going to butcher the phrase, but actually it's quite nice. I'm paraphrasing it, I think. He said, basically, sometimes you can look around the room, people laugh at you, not a single person, is with you. And then time passes as you make the argument, you say it again, and you can't find a single person in the room that disagrees with you. I don't want to get to the place where a single person in the room isn't disagreeing. That sounds not to Tony Benn's incredible, so I'm definitely not, I'm going to stop there. Can I say something with questions? So I'm going to take them in 3. You often hear politicians or commentators say questions, not comments. I'm going to scrap that. If you just want to make a comment, you don't need to add on a tag question at the end. I welcome comments. The only thing I would say is if we can all be disciplined with our time. So if you've been talking, say, for more than a minute and a half, please, it's probably time to stop, whether that's a question or a comment, but 90 seconds for a question or a comment in 3. Are you going to facilitate, Shane?
Yeah, we've got a microphone there, a microphone there. Okay, we'll try to start with a younger woman to start with. Yeah. Where are we? This lady in the purple bowler hat. Purple bowler hat. Yeah. And then...
Oh. And if you can say your name as well, if you're happy to. No.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. It's amazing. My name's Julia, and I heard you mention assemblies earlier, and I just really, really wanted to give you a chance to talk a bit more about that. I'm super interested in how the Green Party are thinking about interacting with the idea of citizens' assemblies, and whether you've got ideas about, how this kind of democratic systems that you already have placed in the party might interact with communities making decisions in different ways.
Thank you. And it was Judy, right?
Julia,
sorry, I misheard. Thanks, Julia.
And a young man, David, over here, ex-principal speaker of the Green Party.
Amazing.
Zack, thank you very much for that. I want to take us back a long way. I was at the party conference 1975, where we voted that we were not an environment party. And that will surprise people, but we took the decision that we would become an ecology party, and we understood the huge difference between ecology and environmentalism. We also understood that political ecology changed the whole paradigm of the way we look at politics. And it was no longer just a matter of left versus right. Ecology took us beyond all of that. So you, as a Green leader, my main question for you is, why are you not talking about political ecology?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got one more question over. Where's the mic? Yeah. One more question there. And then...
Hello, Zack. My name's Zoe Hatch. I'm co-chair of and director of Green Women's Declaration. I used to be co-chair of Green Party Women until I was expelled from the party. So I have a very short question for you. I mean, it was great to hear you say that we do not have to agree on everything. Fantastic. And it is important to have differences and robust debate on those differences. Similarly, it was great to hear you talking to Victoria Derbyshire last week. It was on Newsnight, and you said everyone in the political sphere has the right to express their views. Fantastic, we agree. But if you really believe that, and if you really believe in justice, why are women, such as myself, having to take legal action against the Green Party because we were not allowed to express our views? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go through the questions in order. So, Julia, first of all, thank you. This was a preface in the question, but and then I will answer your question directly. Some people in here might not know how the Green Party makes policy, and then I'll come to the citizen assemblies. So in the Green Party, whether you've been a member decades or a principal speaker, whether you're the leader of a party, you have as much power over our policy as someone who joins the party after this talk. That's a subtle hint there. You can join at join.greenparty.org.uk. Now, the point of what I mean by that is, obviously, I have power in terms of the soft power, in terms of you have a microphone, you've got media, so you talk about where you'd like policy to go. But we're a democratic party in terms of our policy. So any member can design or create a policy. They have to get a certain number of signatures from local parties. That then goes into a big, what we call prioritization order. So every single member has the ability to vote what they think is the most important policy. And then when we get to conference, we vote through those policies in order. If it is rejected, then it can't come back for 6 months or a year, I think it is. And if it's accepted, that's then party policy. And that gives me the freedom as party leader or our party MPs or spokespeople to be able to, when we're on stages of the media, represent party policy. Now, I think, first of all, that is fundamental to the party. And certainly under my leadership, that principle will always remain. I think it's also true that there's a wider conversation for the party to have. And I say wider, this is not me leading the conversation for the reasons I just said, about is our democracy as accessible as it could be. Lots of people can't make it to party conference, for instance. Lots of people, and it will come to your question in a moment, need the party to be accessible, the language to be accessible, and to be able to communicate or be able to access it at the earliest possible moment. And so I think there's a wider conversation about how we include more people in that policy-making process. And it is also true that that policy-making process is fundamental to our DNA. So that's not going to change in terms of it's a member-led democracy. Citizens' assemblies. One thing I love about citizens' assemblies is I met with an organisation who were doing them nationally. In fact, they did one on climate. And they said one of the beautiful moments they had is when they formed one by sortition, which just means like a jury system. The people in the citizens' assembly are selected randomly from the electoral roll, for instance. And they found that the people coming together were really interested in the climate crisis. We know around the world, 89% of people want to see action on the climate crisis. So never let people tell you people don't care about the climate crisis. People understandably are worried it's going to cost them more. And you know what? It shouldn't cost them more. It should cost the very wealthy who are polluting our planet more. And actually, we should make sure that the accessible, greenest option is the cheapest. But they found in the Citizens' Assembly, people were much more kind of ahead than the politicians about what they were willing to do. They also ran in parallel a youth Citizens' Assembly with a group of young people. They got the group of young people to present to the people who weren't as young their ideas. And that made the older Citizens' Assembly, or the not young Citizens' Assembly, even more bold with what they wanted to do. And that's because we're talking about the planet of the future of those young people. Of course, the planet is for everyone. And it's also true that the young people are the people who are going to inherit the earth in the future. So the way we need to connect these things, I think, is continuing with our democracy-led process and recognizing that politics doesn't just happen in rooms like this. It has to happen in our communities. There are lots of people who wouldn't come into these spaces, who would find these spaces as beautiful and lovely as they are. I couldn't feel more at home, unsurprisingly. But there are lots of people who would find it alienating or just not for them, or they wouldn't see the purpose. And so I think we need to look at how do we have community organizing, which includes citizens' assemblies where people are consulted and it's co-designed, and how does that link into proposals that are made to policy so it's coming right from the community into the policy-making space in the party, and then hopefully into Parliament through MPs, or indeed in the future a Green Prime Minister, who is then working on behalf of all of those communities. And that's a long link, and we can get there. It does link with your question, and thank you very much for, I often say that I and the party right now are standing on the shoulders of giants. It's kind of, yes, in fact, round of applause. It's kind of cool to be green right now. And I hope it's always been cool, but I always know that if you turn up at a local party meeting now, I've heard stories of the people turning up tripling or even quadrupling, both in our towns and our cities and our rural areas. So there's amazing energy to it. I'm also aware there are people who bashed away when there were just 3 or 4 of them in a local party because they knew what they were doing and they knew they were right. And we are building on that. So thank you. Political ecology, I would push back with respect and love that I think I've talked about political ecology the entire time I've been at this microphone. I just don't think I've used the phrase political ecology. And the reason for that partly links with Julia's question is I think we've got to create spaces where we avoid as much terminology as possible. Same as when I said hustings and change it to a debate. And two things can be true at the same time. It's an important point you make. It's a good reminder to me that there will be spaces where you talk about political ecology, and it's a good link of where the movement's been and where it's going. There's actually a book that's about to come out, which I promise I'm not involved with. I'm not pitching a book, but it's called The Socialist... Thank you. The Green Socialist and the Battle for Britain's Future. It's written by an amazing man called Russell Warfield, who used to work for the Green Party. He was on my campaign team for leadership, but he's been in the party a long time. And what he's done is gone way back to Jonathan Porritt and people involved in the Ecology Party and interviewed them, because the media often say that I of the party right now is different to how it was decades ago. And the thesis of his book, essentially, is actually there's always been lots of strands of the Green Party. And what's happened right now is they've come together in a political, ecological movement where the media have finally, well, they've not got it, but they've started to understand that we're more than the environment, we're more than ecology. We're actually a movement of system change that are linking all of these things together. Thank you.
We've got about 3 minutes left.
Zoe's question, I've not answered it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So Zoe, you'll understand that I can't talk about you directly because of a live legal case, but let me answer the question more widely. So when I said that I want people to disagree with me and there's red lines, I know that we've got a difference about where those red lines are, or one red line. So for me, the red lines are misogyny, homophobia, racism, any kind of form of hate, and that includes transphobia. Now, I know we have a difference. Yeah. I just want to reiterate, because I can't talk about legal terms, that was not aimed at you, that I'm talking more generally. Right, and I know that there are people who say that they are gender critical, but they won't respect someone's pronouns. For me, respecting someone's pronouns is a basic human dignity, even if you don't believe that they've changed gender or sex. And that's where I stand. That's all.
Okay, we've got literally 3 minutes left, so got a young lady here if you want to stand up and speak up, and then we'll go over there, and then if you could pass the mic to the lady here in the air.
As a young person, I would like to see more spaces created for young people and adults, like teenagers, to learn and kind of progress the Greenpeace movement. Are you on a plan to make that happen?
Thank you. And what was your name?
Elowen, yeah.
Thank you, Ellen.
And gentleman here.
Hello. Boop, boop, boop. Oh, it is on. Yeah, I work in sail trading and boat building, so I think my job's pretty safe in terms of AI. But
You don't know with Elon Musk. Who knows?
you don't know. He might build a sailing robot. But it's clearly one of the most consequential things happening in the global economy is the rollout of AI. I just wonder if you have a vision for for a socially, ecologically, economically just path to AI being rolled out.
Thank you. Did you say two or a third?
And the last question here.
Hi, I'm Maya. I was just wondering what your views and what you'd do on animal liberation from not just a moral point of view, but also from a environment point of view, and specifically factory farming and etc.
Thank you. I'll go in reverse order. Well, we need to end factory farming is where I'd start off. And I also, I'm going to choose my words carefully here for a very specific reason. I don't fly, I don't drive, and I'm vegan. And I do, thank you. And you can do all of those things and still be a really important part of the Green Party movement, of the environmentalist movement. Now, on a personal level, I would encourage anyone to stop eating animals. I believe in animal liberation. I believe that animals are a vital part of our species. I also recognize it's not my role to preach at people, and people will make their own choices. What I also recognize, though, with factory farming is that we have a climate crisis. We know the amount of emissions that happen through the animal industry. We know the amount of cruelty that happens through those ways those animals are murdered in those factory farming. So I would just shout a project called Project Slingshot. With Project Slingshot, and you've probably heard of Led by Donkeys, I actually went to Buckingham Palace about 3 weeks ago, and we projected in the middle of the night on Buckingham Palace scenes of animal factory farming with the amazing comedian Diane Morgan, who you probably know as Philomena Kunk. And she was just on Buckingham Palace going, "Does the king know about this?" That was a terrible accent. And so I think, I say this as a vegan, I think we always have to look at how can we use humour, how can we connect with people so we're not hectoring people, and make people know that if you're just reducing your meat intake, that's great. That's all we're asking for now. I don't think it's about demanding that everyone goes vegan. If you can go vegan, I've got so much to say about that. I think it's a brilliant thing to do, but also I don't think it's our role to tell people, am I running out of time? Should I be quicker? Okay, great. AI, I'm going to give you an unsatisfactory answer, which is I don't have a quick answer in 30 seconds. My quick answer, though, is we do need to get proper regulation, and it shouldn't be politicians who make the decisions when they're not tech experts. We should be listening to tech experts and, most importantly, the people who are going to be affected, as I said earlier, to design a system that is ultimately beneficial for people, their economies and their communities, and not beneficial for vested interests. I accept that's not really the specifics of what you're asking me, but that would be my starting place. And I think citizens' assemblies actually would probably be a way to get there. And Elowen, thank you so much for your question. I often say, if you want to see the Labour Party manifesto in 5 years' time, look at the Green Party manifesto right now, because... And if you want to see the Green Party manifesto in a few years' time, have a conversation with some young Greens, because they're usually at the front of what it is. For those who don't know, the Young Green is a part of the Green Party, although it's kind of its own separate and independent force. It's aged. I'm going to look at Georgia, who's my amazing member of staff. Shout out for Georgia, who does everything for me. Up to 30 or in full-time education, I think. And that includes under 18s. Do get anyone you know involved, children, grandchildren, brothers and sisters. It's an amazing way of getting involved with the party, and they have amazing meetups, political education, and so much of the organising that we're saying. I also want to echo, though, that there are people in the party who have been doing this for decades, and it's not just about young people. We want to make sure that we are representing everyone. Finally, I just want to say, both to you and to everyone, as kind of an echo of everything I've just said, leadership, I'm not someone who's shy of a microphone, you've probably noticed. I'm not shy of social media. You've probably noticed that too. And leadership should never come from one person. Leadership is about connected movements. It's about us looking each other in the eyes and building the movement. So whether you've been in the party a long time, thank you for everything you're doing. If you're on the edge, this is the moment to get involved. We need you more now than ever before. I've not spoken a lot about Andy Burnham during this talk. I recognise that for some people, there is hope there, and I get that. But what I would say about that hope is he's appointed a Home Secretary who is putting out deportation videos in the Home Office, who wants to put indefinite leave to remain from 5 years to 10 years, and wants asylum seekers to review their cases every 30 months. We have a Prime Minister who wants to apologise for Labour's actions on Gaza, but doesn't yet want to show the material action that we need. And we have a Labour Prime Minister who is talking about being pragmatic with drilling for North Sea oil and gas. So, and this is the point. You're free to do what you want. I almost don't want to boo Andy Burnham. I want us to push Andy Burnham to a much better place. But I think we're way past that. I think we need to make sure we are building a movement that is ready not just to be disappointed by Labour, but to replace Labour. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much indeed. Fantastic questions. Zack, as always, thank you very much. I just want to end on a quick straw poll. Okay, hands up if you are currently a member of the Green Party. Oh, bloody hell. Hands up if you are going to join the Green Party as a result of this. Yes. Job done. Okay.